All right. So as I mentioned, at the end of this webinar, you're going to be able to do a few things. For one is you're going to be able to identify all the apps that are available to you. I'm going to walk you through the different apps, but in particular, I'm going to walk you through a few examples, the Apache example and perhaps some of the AWS apps that we have in place. You're going to learn how to install and customize your apps, both doing a manual installation as well as using the collector wizard. You'll be able to install the admin apps, and we'll talk a little bit about the importance of installing these two administrative apps. And the last thing is I'm going to talk a bit about the preview apps and give you an idea of what's coming down the pipe. The great thing is also I'm going to show you how to send some feature requests to us. So if there are apps that you want to see or you want to vote stuff up, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that and be able to pull to make sure that your vote counts and get some of the apps that matter to you to a higher priority. All right, so as always, I start my webinars with giving you the 30,000-foot view, and this one is no exception. When we talk about the Sumo Logic data flow, there's three main areas here: the data collection, getting your data into the system, which we do through a series of sources and collectors, and then number 2 and number 3, which is where we're going to be focusing today, talk about taking that data and starting to convert that data into meaningful information. So we use operators, we use our charts to start plotting our data, and eventually we want to visualize that. We want to share it with other people through dashboards, and we want to start getting alerted through, we want to use alerts to know about our critical events. So today what we're going to focus on is apps, and the world of apps really targets this second and third area, which is starting to create your data. And really what apps are is out-of-the-box content. It's predefined alerts, predefined dashboards, it's predefined searches that give you about 80% of what you need for a particular source. All right, so you've probably seen these slides if you've attended some of my webinars. We normally, within continuous intelligence, we normally target these three main areas: the DevOps, the IT infrastructure and operations, and the compliance and security, which we've rebranded to build, run, and secure. So if you've been in the latest webinars, you've probably heard these three words: build, run, and secure. I wanted to give you this in context so that I can talk about the different apps that we have in that world. I don't have enough real estate here to put all the apps in place, but what I wanted to show you is that we have, for example, for the build space, it looks like someone cannot see the slides. Apologies. I am now showing you the slides. Let me just backtrack for a second. Sorry about that. I just realized that after having the issue with audio, I did not share the slides. Okay, I'm just going to backtrack, and thank you, Will, for pointing that out. So now I hope that you can see the slides, and if you can confirm, Will, that'd be great. But Sumo Logic has these three main areas, and as I was mentioning before, apps is going to focus on these two later areas, which is searching and analyzing and visualizing and monitoring. Thank you, Will, for pointing it out. All right, so apps are going to work on these two worlds, and like I said, apps are out-of-the-box prepackaged content for your operators. For your queries that use operators, for your dashboards, and the ability to get about 80% of what you need from a source. I talked about the three different use cases: the DevOps, which we rebranded to build, the IT infrastructure, which we call run, and being able to stay within compliance and manage your security, which we call secure. So in this particular slide, what I'm pointing out here is that in each one of those spaces, in the build space, we have apps that help you with your code, apps that help you with your continuous integration and delivery, as well as apps that help you with your packaging and containers, such as a Docker, for example. In the run space, we have apps that help you with your monitoring and performance, your troubleshooting, root cause, application analytics. And in the secure space, you'll see some apps that are specific for security analytics, for managing your compliance, as well as audits and security for your infrastructure. In particular, I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 different cases. I'm going to show you the Apache app a little bit more in depth. I don't have time to show you all of them, but at least I'll try with the Apache one in the run space. And then I'm going to try to do an example for the AWS that straddles both build and secure in here. So let's jump into my instance. This is you all are probably fairly familiar with this. This is my search screen where I can start running searches from here. And many of you have actually built searches from scratch. You specify your source category, you specify perhaps some keyword that you want to search, and you run those searches, you start building your searches, you eventually chart them, and you eventually create them into dashboards. But the idea behind apps is not having to start from scratch, but instead being able to take advantage of things that already exist. So for those of you who have played around a little bit with apps, you probably went here under library, and you went into apps itself. And for those of you who are brand spanking new to apps here allow you, like I mentioned before, to install content that is already pre-configured. So for example, if I were to choose, say, a Docker, which is a container that allows me to build stuff, I can go here into Docker and I can find out a little bit about what this app is all about, and I can see some of the content that would get installed if I were to choose to install my Docker. I'm not going to run through the installation. First, I'm going to show you a few things, and then we're going to run through the installations. But I want to point out that if you click on Learn More, it's going to take you to our documentation. There is documentation for every single app that follows this same pattern. And if you look at it, it tells you a little bit about what this app is all about. It even tells you what events it's going to be picking up from your source system. In this case, it's going to be picking up Docker events and statistics. It points you to the Docker documentation where you can find a little more about its API and how we're going to be gathering those events. And then in this particular case, it has three other links. One is, what do I need to do on the, oh, sorry about that. What do I need to do on the Docker side so that I can get those events to be sent to Sumo Logic? The second one here is, what are the dashboards that get installed through the app? And the third one is, what do I need to do on the Sumo Logic app side to be able to install that app? So I'll walk you briefly through this and fairly quick. Remember, these exist for each and every one of my apps. So here's all the details of what I need to do in order to, from the Docker side, in order to get those events flowing to Sumo Logic. Then probably more important to you at this point is, what are the dashboards that I'm going to get installed? So in this case, it's showing you screenshots of the dashboard along with some detail of what each one of those panels in those dashboards are all about. CPU performance, memory performance, network performance, and so on. And last but not least, it gives you the information of how do you go about installing that app in Sumo Logic. And we're going to go through these steps, and these steps are very similar for every app, so they're pretty straightforward. And you'll notice that it takes us less than 2 minutes to actually install an app. All right, let me close this for just a second. You'll notice that I'll be pointing you to documentation a lot, and the reason behind that is because a lot of your info and a lot of your questions get answered in there. But what if we go to, in this particular case, Docker only has, the Docker app only has some dashboards. What if I were to go, let's say, to the Apache app, which has a few of the dashboards, but it also has some of the queries that are in here? Perhaps I want to know a little bit more about those queries. Let me go to, let me choose this one, top 404 referrers. I can click on the queries, and I can even see what the query is all about. So I could always copy this and paste it in my window so that I could run the search even before I install the app. Or we actually let you preview some of this stuff without installing the app. So in this case, all I have to do is choose my source category. In this case, mine is called Apache Access. So I have to tell it what is the right data to go through this search, and then I can run that search. So notice how I'm actually running a search that exists in the app without actually having to install the app itself. So I can test if this is the right data that I want to do. In this case, I'm looking at top 404 referrers. So here are the referrers themselves, and here is the count of 404s for the last 15 minutes as I'm showing in there. Okay, so what I've shown you so far is a little bit of getting to install these apps. Fortunately for me, someone has done the homework already, and I actually have quite a few apps installed. We have here an account called Sumo Apps, and for demonstration purposes, we've actually installed all these. So I'm going to show you a few of these apps that we have installed, and I'll start with Apache since I had already shown you some of that. I can go into the Apache app that was installed. let me open up some of these reports so that we can actually take a quick peek at what these are all about. And while those are opening, I'll show you as well that not only do we get dashboards as part of the app, we also get queries like the one that I showed you before. So maybe I want to look at a query called top clients causing errors. Again, all I have to do is click on it, and it's going to show me the query itself. And there you go. Here are my different source IPs, meaning my clients, and this is an approximate count of the errors that are being created on that side. We'll talk a little more about the queries themselves. We'll talk a little bit about how to edit some of these queries as well, what these public parsers are all about, and how we can avoid these in the future as well. So a little more coming through that. But what I want to show you right now is the fact that there is a lot of content that already exists, and the fact that you don't have to start from scratch. There's no need for you to start from scratch building your content if there is content for that source already. Let's take a peek at some of the dashboards. So here is the Apache Overview. And mind you, I had to do absolutely nothing other than installing it for all these dashboards and all these panels to exist. So I can see visitor locations against my Apache web servers. I see traffic distribution. I see response times. I see traffic volumes by bytes served. I can even see visitor access by types. So here is by platform. Here it is by devices. I can see it by browsers and operating systems. And perhaps this is not 100% of what you need, but my point here is that it's getting you about 80% of what you need. And it might even answer some of the questions that you didn't even initially have. Here is another one showing you Apache visitor locations. So broken by worldwide versus the US, and same here by state and so on. I'm showing you here Apache Visitor Traffic Insight, top referrers. So a lot of information that I might want to know about my web servers. And then web server operations. So 10 bots observed, 404 errors, my top 5 clients causing errors, and so on. Here's the beauty of all this stuff, is that what if I really like this, but I perhaps want to tweak it a little bit? The great news behind all this is that if I were to click on any of these panels, let me click on, say, this one. What happened just now is it actually takes me to the search behind that panel. So I now have the ability to see exactly how that query was built. And if I were to want to tweak it, let's say that I really cared for the 500 errors, not just the 200 status codes, but anything that has a 500 error, I can now tweak my, my query. And with that simple change, I can now run it again, and I can see what those numbers are going to look like for anything that matches a 500. Perhaps that's what I wanted to do in terms of the search. So again, you don't have to start from scratch. You can take queries that exist, tweak them to your heart's content, and be able to see what else is out there. All right, pretty cool. So from an Apache web server, a lot of info that it's incredibly meaningful. Like I said before, you can change things as needed. The next one I wanted to show you is one around AWS. So let's go back to that folder, Sumo Apps, which I have them all installed. And let's take the Amazon VPC flow. Let me just open a few of these in here for your benefit. And for those of you who are not familiar with VPC flow logs, essentially these flow logs capture the IP network traffic of your VPC. Let me just go open one of these, for example. So once you have the ability to capture that IP network traffic, it allows you to troubleshoot traffic and security issues. This flow log data is stored in Amazon CloudWatch logs. So once you've created a flow log, you can start viewing and retrieving its data in your CloudWatch logs. Now, the Sumo Logic app for Amazon VPC flow logs leverages this data from CloudWatch, and it provides you this real-time visibility, and you can do analysis on your environment. So here's yet another example of stuff that exists out of the box. Again, I didn't have to do anything other than install. So I'm getting an overview of everything that I see. So for example, I could be looking here at my VPC flows and start realizing, oh my goodness, my count of rejects is actually pretty high. And what I would want to do then is start diving a little deeper to find what that is all about. So we even have dashboards that focus specifically on rejections. So I can start seeing if all those rejects are happening from one same source IP, or are they coming from numerous source IP. So I can see the top rejects. You can, by the way, click on this icon here, and it's going to enlarge that particular panel for you. So I can see the top reject sources by addresses. I can see them by destination as well, and you get the point. A lot of data in here that is already served up for you, and you don't have to build it. Like I said before, I could always go and tweak it. I can click on any of these, and I can tweak it to my heart's content. Here's a great dashboard. This one's talking about rejects by minute, plotted into an outlier. So in reality, I don't have to keep an eye on all rejects because some rejects are possible, but I do want to keep an eye when this number goes outside of the norm. So if it goes outside of a standard deviation, this outlier would definitely let me know. So that's where you probably want to start creating alerts against those particular rejects. Excellent. I don't see any questions so far on the chat, so I'm going to continue with this. But my point here is you can start viewing a lot of this data that exists out of the box. Some of these dashboards are interactive, which means that you can actually filter. So for example, I might want to filter by a specific IP address. Perhaps I want to do a little bit more digging. I can enter my IP address, my destination port, or a particular action, whether it's I just care for reject or so. I can pull those numbers, and you see how my dashboards reset to now only showing me specific actions that I want to pull in there. So a little bit of dashboards. So you have dashboards that allow you to, for example, display them up on a big screen so that they can go into your operations center, for example. Or you can have dashboards that would be more tools for troubleshooting and tools for or templates, if you will, that you can share with your team so that they can use for a little bit of investigation and forensics. All right, super cool. So let's close these VPC dashboards, and I'll show you one last one before we jump into the actual installation of these apps. The last one that I want to show you is AWS CloudTrail. And for those of you who are not familiar with CloudTrail, AWS CloudTrail records all the different API calls that are made into your AWS. So let me just open some of these as well. Notice how you have AWS CloudTrail user monitoring, you have overviews, you have operations, you have network securities. I don't know if all of them open, but we'll take a peek here in a second. Yeah, there you go. So here's my console logins. I can see as well my network and security. So for those teams that are concerned with compliance and security, I can see all the different things that are happening in my environment, in my organization. I can see things that are specific to operations. And like I said again, and I'm going to hammer this home again, maybe this doesn't cover 100% of your use case. Not all customers have the same thing. So what we've tried to do here is package about 80% of the use cases that you need. So you can take this as a good starting point, and from here you can start editing these dashboards or copying these dashboards and creating something that is a little more tailored to your specific needs as well. All right, fantastic. I don't see any questions so far, so I'm going to continue. So what I wanted to jump to is start showing you a little bit of how to install these apps. Some of you mentioned in the poll that you've installed a little bit, you've played around. Nobody's necessarily using some of this content regularly. So what I'm going to show you today is how to install these apps, and what I'm going to encourage you to do in the next few days is go ahead and install some of these. Start looking at the content that is in there. Reach out to me if you need to. My email is mario@Sumo Logic, and I'd love to hear what things work for you, what things don't work. Our product management team is fairly involved. I'm sure they would love to hear as well. So I'll highly encourage you guys to get involved. All right, how do we go about installing? So if you go to the apps, which is where you would see all the different apps that are available for you, you can go in here and choose the app that you want to install. In this case, I'm going to play with Apache, which has already been pre-selected for me since I was there earlier. And I'm going to click on the install button. So this is, again, showing me all the different things that it would install. Remember, I have the ability to preview some of these queries, as I showed you before. I also have the ability to, I'm just going to show you because I'm going to be doing this a lot. If I were to go to documentation and I just enter the word apps in here, it's going to show me the various apps that are available to me. And if there's an app in particular that I want to know a little bit more about, let's say I showed you the Docker app before, but let's say I wanted to find out a little more about the Box app, I can always go and look at what are the different dashboards that would get installed, what do they look like, what's the description of those dashboards, and so on. But let's say that we've already done all that homework and we just want to install this Apache app. The installation process, the mechanics for this are incredibly simple. You click on install, and from here, you have the ability to drop this into any folder that you want. In my case, I am going to put it in a folder called Apache, and it's going to put it in your personal folder. So you can create a new folder called apps, or you can put it just under personal. But the key thing here is this area over on the left-hand side. This is asking you, excellent, you have a lot of data in your environment. What data should how do I identify that data? What's tagged in that data that I can choose to know that this is only Apache data? So in my case, I'm going to choose my Apache Access data. Mind you that you could have chosen a custom filter. You could have said, for example, if you're not selecting by source category, but perhaps you're doing by source equals Apache, and or you might have something like source category equals anything that is prod, for example. You just want to do your prod stuff and your source is Apache. So if your filter happens to be custom, you can do that here. You can specify how is that data identifiable. In my case, it's a little simpler because I've chosen a source category that fully identifies it. I select that category. I give it a name. I should click on this one. I specify where I want it to get installed, and I click install. And oh, you know what? I actually installed this earlier, so I'm just going to choose Apache 2 for demonstration purposes, and click on install. So you'll notice it takes very little time, and what it's really doing right now is it's copying all those dashboards. It's copying all those queries that you saw listed here in the background, and it's dropping them into my folder, but it's preceding those queries with my source category. The source category could vary from customer to customer, so it's really just editing all those queries so they now have my source category and they're going to work for my data. So we click on go, it's going to take me directly into that folder. So just to show you exactly where it dropped them, if I go back to personal, which is my own personal folder of content, now in that I have two folders. I have a training folder and an apps folder, and within that apps folder, there it built a second Apache 2 folder. So if I go into that, there it is. Here's all the different queries. Like I showed you before, I can click on some of these dashboards, and it's going to start opening those dashboards, as well as I can click on any of these queries, for example, the top 404 referrers, and it's going to go and run that query using, as you would expect, my source category in that particular query. Okay, let's take a peek at some of those dashboards that ran. And I want to point you a couple of things. So first things to notice, let's see if I can pull up a dashboard that has that kind of information. Perfect. Here is a good example. You'll notice that the dashboards are not complete in here. Some of them are showing a little more data than others. The reason behind this is because these are considered live dashboards. So in this case, it says the last 60 minutes. A live dashboard, as the word suggests, is live data, so data that is happening at the moment. So this particular dashboard is going to take 60 minutes to complete, and you'll see it's going to start filling to the left. So when minute 61 comes around, that last minute is going to drop off my screen, and the next minute is going to come into place. So if you install an app and you start seeing that you see something like that there is not much data, don't worry. It's going to take that time frame for that data to actually load. But if I look at a few others in here, I start seeing that definitely data is flowing into these dashboards. So again, I have done absolutely nothing other than install this app and check it out. I already have some valuable content in here. So for example, I can start targeting my pages to these particular types of platforms if I'd like to as well. Excellent. So that's the simple way of installing your apps. That's what we call a manual install. So I went into the library, I went into apps, and from here I chose which folder I wanted to. Let's say I wanted to install Box, for example, and then I can click on install and it would create that content for me. The second way to install this data, a little less common, but it could happen to you, is if you are running the setup wizard to load data into your system. So let's say that I want to create a brand new collector, or perhaps I want to upload a file. Yeah, let's actually go that route. Let's say that I wanted to upload a file. When you want to upload a file, you select what type of file that is. It could be something that is from your custom app, in which case you select other. But if it's any of these other ones, let's say Nginx, and you choose Nginx here and you choose your source category, let's say that, that your convention looks something like this, Nginx, then the system realizes, okay, you're going to be loading Nginx data. We have a very good idea what Nginx data looks like. We now have your source category. So when you load that file, when you create this collector, we're actually going to install that Nginx app for you. If you don't want it, you can always delete it, but we're going to save you the step of having to go through the installation of the app. So it would install it for you. And the same thing will happen if you choose any of these other ones for which we have an app. Let's say that you didn't want to upload a file, but instead you went the other route, which was, I'm going to go back here and go to the collection setup wizard, and you do streaming data. Same thing would happen. If you're going to load, again, let me just choose Nginx. If you're going to create a collector that is going to be loading Nginx data, again, we're going to automatically install that app for you because we assume that content is something that you will want to use as a starting point. Again, you have the ability to delete it if you need to. So the two methods in review are, one, you can install data automatically using this collector. You can install your apps, or your apps will get installed automatically when you choose a data source that we know about and we have an app for. And the second way to install it is going and doing it manually, going under library, clicking on apps, selecting which one you want to install, let's say Artifactory, and then clicking on install and specifying the source category for that particular source that you're going to be loading. Okay, I don't see any questions on the tab, so I'm going to continue. Now, a couple of things that I want to talk about in terms of installation. One is you probably want to do some editing to some of your content. Let's say that in here you might want to edit, you don't care about the top 10 searches, but rather you care about the top 20 searches because you want to see a little more of this data. Like I mentioned before, you can always click on the dashboard itself, and it's going to take you to the search behind it. And this is the search itself. So in this case, the change would be pretty simple. Instead of limiting for the top 10, I'm going to limit it for the top 20. And it's as simple as that. I click on Start. I have a brand new search. I can see the results, and if that's what I want, I now can modify my dashboard to do that. How do I modify the dashboard? Well, most of you have probably already created a dashboard, and you probably remember that you went in here and you said create a panel. In this particular case, I have a second icon that says save back to panel. What that allows me to do is, Sumo Logic is smart enough to realize that this query came from a panel that you clicked on, so you have the ability to just save that change back to that particular panel. Or, as I was mentioning before, you can create a brand new panel and put it in a brand new dashboard if you wanted to. So that's how you go about editing some of these dashboards. Obviously, you can do the same with the queries. So if I go back to the app that I installed under Personal, and I go to that Apache 2, and I have a query here that is pulling all my robots, I can go and edit that query as well. Perhaps mine is not a TXT, but it's a log file that I'm pulling from. And I can go and run that query and edit it from there. All right, so far so good. One of the things I definitely want to bring to your attention is this part in here. Most of our apps right now talk about Parse using what we call public parsers. So back in the day, before we had something called the field extraction rules, we used these public parsers. And you could think of them as little black boxes that had all this parse regex in the background. And what they would do is, or what they actually do is they go about and they just parse your log files. They grab everything that exists in there, they parse it, and then they run it for you. So if I go back to, say, this one in here, my top 404 refers, you notice that I'm looking for some data that has a 404, then I'm running some parsing on that data, and then I'm doing some limiting of data that I want to do from there, and then I'm doing some counting and so on. Now, in the good days, we actually have something called a field extraction rule. And a field extraction rule, I'm going to show you briefly in here. I'm sort of taking a little bit of a tangent, but the idea behind this is that what you will see in the near future is that those parse libraries that you see there, those public parsers, are going to go away. And instead, they're going to be replaced by actual field extraction rules, or by the proper parse itself. So for this field extraction rules, what they do is they parse my messages as they're coming into Sumo Logic. So as data is getting ingested into Sumo Logic, we take that data and we parse it. For example, here's one for Apache Access. If I look at this one, you notice that it has a parse expression. And what it's doing is, it's exactly what that public parser is doing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to copy this data here. Let me just make sure I did copy it. I'm going to copy this data in here, and I'm going to go back to that search query just to prove to you that I lie sometimes, but not this time. I'm going to replace this. I'm going to replace this parsing statement that we had in here by that parsing rule. And let me clean this up just to start showing you a little bit of best practices as well. So what I just did is I replaced that parsing statement with these parsing regex expressions. And those parsing regex expressions are going to do the exact same thing. If I run this now, I will have my same results. And the reason for that is because this parse regex is doing the exact same thing. So what we're trying to do is a little bit of transparency. Instead of having this little black box that goes off in the background and parses for you, we're actually showing you and giving you the parsing. Not only that, but these tend to be a little more performant. But what's even better than this, and I'm just going to push it one step further for best practices, is the ideal situation is that you actually, instead of parsing here in line within your query, you actually want to build a field extraction rule like we did in here. And in this case, because the parsing rule has already been built, check it out. I can actually do this. I can remove this parsing statement. Why? Because that data has already been parsed. So I'm going to get rid of that. And instead, I'm just going to have the query itself. And as you would expect, the query works because all those fields have already been parsed. We already know what the field status code is because it has been parsed earlier. We already know what refer is because it has been parsed earlier by that field extraction rule. All that was a long story to show to tell you that in the very near future, all these apps that you see here that have parsing field or these public parsers, those public parsers are going to get replaced by the regex expression that should go with that data. So you should expect that in the very near future for those apps themselves. Okay, we have about another 20 minutes or 15 minutes, so I want to briefly jump back here to the slides because I want to talk about a couple of apps that we do recommend. So there are two admin apps that we normally recommend customers to install. One of them is the Data Volume app. And the reason we suggest the Data Volume app is because it gives you this view of your account's data usage. So you all of a sudden have an idea of the volume of data that is coming into your system, and you can break it by category, you can break it by collector, by source name, by host. Let me show you a little example of this. But one of the things to keep in mind is that this requires you to enable the data volume index. And what the data volume index does is it starts tracking all that log data. It starts ingesting all that log data saying, oh, listen, this is the type of data that you're loading. Now, the reason why this is not enabled initially or by default is because this data that gets ingested does count towards your data quota. But keep in mind that this is very, very minimal. However, we want to, out of transparency and just to make sure that everybody's aware of what adds to their data quota, we disable it and then we talk to you about enabling this piece. But let me show you this app very quickly here. So here's the, I'm going to go back to the to those apps that have already been installed. And here is the data volume app. So I'll just show you briefly this dashboard in here. And this one is just going to show me, when it loads, it's just going to show me a breakdown of my top source categories. So here's the source categories, my collectors, my source names. So again, it shows me a breakdown of the volume that gets loaded by all these different categories, by source, category, collector, name, host. Similar to that dashboard, you also have queries like these ones. You can see, you can run the same query, volume by source category, and so on. All right, similar to data volume app, there's another app called the Audit Map. And the Audit App allows you to analyze all the events that are giving you insight of how people are using Sumo Logic in your organization. This one also requires enabling the audit index for the same reasons. This ingests a little bit of data that comes towards your quota, but again, it's very minimal, so there shouldn't be much impact. But what you see here is all of a sudden you can see how people in your organization are using Sumo Logic. So I'll just show you our audit index environment in here. So let me just open user activity and scheduled searches. So if you look at this first one, user activity, it's going to give me a little bit of information of how people are using data in my system. So last successful logins, there I am. It looks like a few people have logged in after me. I can see where the hits are coming from, successful login attempts, modifications, password resets. This one in here in particular is giving me information about scheduled searches. So my successful searches, any searches that have been skipped, timeout, suspended. In my case, I don't have any, so my my dashboards show empty or null values. But it could show you anything that has timed out or skipped in your organization. So again, a little bit of information about the usage of your Sumo Logic by your users. I also want to talk about two other apps that require so two things. One is these apps are only available to customers that have an enterprise account, and the second thing is these apps are a little more complex to implement. So it actually requires paid professional services to implement this. And you can actually request an estimate for this via the apps page. So if you go and you look at those two apps, I'm going to go here for a second and show you, say, the security or the PCI app. If you click on security analytics, oops, no, sorry, if I go into the apps world, I'm sorry. And I go into the security analytics app, for example, you notice here's a button for you to request estimate. So these two apps are more for those of you who are in the security and compliance space. But they, like I said, they are enterprise apps that are only available to Sumo Logic enterprise accounts only. Okay, last thing I want to show you is you noticed that down after apps there is a preview tab. Currently there isn't anything in the preview tab, but in the next couple of days you will actually start seeing some of these apps in here. And what is a preview tab? Essentially these are apps that we're still working on, but we have enough content that we want to start sharing with our general audience. And things to keep in mind is that they're not at 100% supported. They're not necessarily complete. There is a big chance that some of these might still change, and you might need to install the newer version once the latest ones are in place. But it's a good way for you to start playing with some of the apps that are coming. It's a great way for you to give us feedback on some of the apps. So we're going to link all these apps to a community page, and I'll talk about community in just a second, but this is a great way for you to start using some of the apps that are coming and give us some feedback. So in the next couple of days, you're actually going to see GitHub, you're going to see O365, Google Apps, I believe Salesforce as well. Here are some of the ones that are tentative to be scheduled for Q2 as well. And like I said before, if you see something here that you like, you're more than welcome to go and vote for it. Or you can always, if you don't see something here, you can let us know what makes sense for you guys to have in place. So let me pause here for just a second and open it up to questions. Are there any questions in the audience, whether it be about upcoming apps, existing apps, installing apps, or the usage of the content that exists? No? Okay, maybe some people are typing. In the meantime, I'll talk about what's available to you. So a couple of things. You saw me point to documentation quite a bit. As much as I can help it, I probably will continue to point you there. You can always access documentation from the help, and you can click on here and find out a lot more about those apps even before you install them. The second thing I wanted to point out was our training page. If you go to sumologic.com/training, there's a few resources here. There's the public instructor-led training, like the one that you're attending right now, but we also have a lot of online self-paced training. For those of you who are just starting, there's a few videos here to kind of get you started. There's a tutorial, but the one I wanted to point out to you guys is this library. If you want to jump into a few other topics, we have a video library, and it's broken by these ones in here. So let's say that I want to go into analyze data. This kind of just gives me an intro to searching and parsing. How do I analyze with log reduce? How about livetail, log compare? So a few more videos that get you into specific areas of our product. I also wanted to point you to the fact that you can enter your own feature requests. I'm going to click here for just a second because I want to show you this. Not only can you add a new idea, you have the ability to vote for ideas that exist. So as I was mentioning before, if you find an app that has already been requested and you want to vote for that app so that it gets more votes, we look at this very carefully and we bubble up things that have higher votes, and that's how we prioritize what are the things that are going to be come out in future releases. So like I said, feel free to let us know what is your idea or vote for an idea that already exists. We're definitely keeping an eye on that. And last but not least, I want to point you to our community. So we recently rebranded and relaunched our community. If you have questions, you can always go to our community page where you can search across posts. So let's say today we were talking about apps. I can always enter apps and find out a little more information of posts that are here about apps themselves. So someone's talking about the Microsoft API, so the 365 app. Here's some questions from a customer in particular. Here's someone talking about the preview tab that is coming out. So you can not only search about topics, you can actually post your own topics as well. And something that is pretty cool about our community is that it's linked to our documentation. So if you're in community searching for apps, it's also going to serve you all those topics from our documentation that talk about apps themselves. How do I install the Audit app? How do I look at apps in general? And you get the point. All right, so as much as I can, I'm encouraging you guys to take advantage of all the different resources that you have. You can look at documentation, look at training videos, definitely come to our community. And if you feel like you're stuck or you've hit a bug, you of course are able to open a support case, and you can do that from your same environment, help, support, and that'll help you, that'll walk you through opening a support case. Questions, concerns, grievances? Okay, if there are no questions, we'll break this for today, and I hope this was helpful. I will email you guys the recording of this session so you can share with your peers. Thank you so much for attending. Have a great day.